All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg, and almost a smooth start. Had to turn down that music. Didn't do it exactly the way I should have, but good enough. It is, what is it? It's Tuesday, and I'm starting late, an hour late today because I had a family situation I had to deal with, so I apologize for any inconvenience to folks, but that's the reason I had to deal with a situation here. It wasn't quite called an emergency, but it wasn't great. But that's taken care of, and hopefully I'll have a full hour of content. I am pleased to see we are streaming through the thumbnail that I put up. I know that was an issue yesterday, and I made a lot of tests, and I'm still not sure what caused it. I really don't know, but at least it didn't happen today. So that's a good thing, and hopefully it won't happen again. 240-242-5646 if you want to join me. 240-242-5646 if you'd like to join me. And also, don't forget, please click like, please click subscribe. If you click subscribe and you click the bell, then you'll automatically get notifications when I go live. So even if there's a problem with the thumbnail, you'll still be able to know exactly when I start if you want to watch the program live, which I do recommend because if you can, because then you can comment and call in. If you watch it at your leisure, that's of course great, and I'm happy, but you don't get the opportunity to interact with other viewers and with me directly if you want to call in. 240-243-5646. We start in, well, as we do, in Gaza, Israel. And again, the killing, it doesn't matter what else is happening in the Middle East, whether Israel is bombing Lebanon, whether Israel is destabilizing and creating regime change in Libya. It really, whether they're attacking Iran, it doesn't really matter. There's always time for the Israeli military to kill Palestinians. 34 more killed yesterday in Gaza as the genocide proceeds full tilt. It is horrific. It's awful. It's ugly. It's an atrocity. War crimes, they're all there. Yoav Gallant, by the way, one of the two indicted by, I think there's an arrest warrant out for him, right? The former defense minister. He was fired by Netanyahu because he, I guess, wasn't quite zealous enough and did tell Bibi to stop. We got to end. This isn't working. And he got fired for that. He was in, or is right now in D.C. I don't have the story up for you. I was going to talk about it, but I decided not to. The Addis Israel Synagogue, which is an enormous D.C. synagogue. It's conservative, I think, so not quite Orthodox, but also not Reform either. They had invited Gallant to speak, and they rescinded the invitation. A number of the congregants at that synagogue did let the rabbi and the other managers, I don't know what the term is for them, I guess manager maybe, or the board, know that they didn't want Gallant speaking, that they felt it would be a betrayal of their Jewish values to allow this charged war criminal to speak, and the synagogue ultimately rescinded its invitation. Well, let me be a little clearer about that. They didn't quite rescind it, but they moved the location of his speech to, I believe, ADL offices or some other very Zionist organizations' offices where they said the security would be better. So it's unfortunate that the synagogue couldn't come out with a clean statement that they simply will not entertain war criminals, or at least certainly not allow them to speak unfettered. Now, I'd be fine with allowing Gallant to speak at the synagogue if he was on the pulpit with at least one or two Palestinian representatives, with victims of his assaults. And if they were afforded the opportunity to speak at the exact same amount of time or more, then go on to cross-examine him to answer his direct assertions and also to present evidence of his crimes, I think then it's okay. But unless you're prepared to confront perpetrators of mass murder, then no, you don't let them speak. Again, 240-242-5646. The situation horrific in Gaza, as always, for decades, and worse now than ever. From Reuters, so this is not one of the Palestinian or Arab news services, Muslim news from predominantly Muslim countries, the news services that I often use. This is from Reuters. You can see just how much damage, all the buildings pretty much bombed out. There's just complete destruction that Israel has wrought throughout Gaza. That's a house at a refugee camp. Dateline December 7. So a few days ago, that's a refugee camp that Israel's bombing. Those are our allies. That's who we support. That's who Harris Biden supports. That's who Kamala said she would support with unwaveringly. So what we see now is clearly the fruits of Harris Biden foreign policy. It's genocide that they deserve to lose. Now, of course, I'm not defending Trump, but Trump didn't commit this crime. Harris Biden are the aiders, abettors, and accomplices of Netanyahu and Israel. And they made us complicit. They made us guilty too. It's such a stain on our nation. This may be the worst. Is this the worst thing we've done? It's hard for me to think. Well, yeah. I mean, if you want to, I shouldn't say that, because obviously the Native American genocide, the transatlantic slave trade, and slavery here, given the number of victims, given the number of years over which those crimes were committed, I can't put this in that league. But, we're committing genocide. We are helping another country eliminate an entire ethnic group. And that's as bad as anything can be. Really, the only reason that, the transatlantic slave trade and slavery here and the Native American genocide are worse is because of the number of victims and the time over which it occurred. But for us to be complicit in this, this is a crime of, it's just extraordinarily wrong. Now, I think about how to stop it, right? I mean, we all have a duty. I come on this little video thing I do here, this live stream, and I try to persuade people, and not with a lot of effect, not with a lot of impact, unfortunately, but I do what little I can. Now, I know there's the idea, which I don't dispute, that maybe what we really need, we do need to confront it. We need civil disobedience, or maybe even full-blown, full-on disobedience. I'm not saying they're wrong. That's wrong. It's not something I want to do. But, with regard to that, where you actually, put yourself in harm's way, I'm not talking about performative arrest where you go stand in front of the White House and everyone knows you're going to be taken into some little tent area and detained for a couple of hours and released. What the climate justice people are doing, Climate Defiance, and I've been critical of that organization. I really have, but I got an email from them and I give them credit. The leader, Michael Greenberg, sends out an email saying that he's going to be meeting with the deputy of the Department of Energy on Wednesday, tomorrow, and then Thursday they're actually planning to blockade the entry to the Department of Energy. And I give him credit. That's pretty ballsy. That's pretty awesome to do that. And they, you block the entrance to a federal building, you will I assume, I would be very, very surprised that the police don't haul them off to the jail. It's not going to be just like a little, here's your little fine, go away. It's not going to be like that, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's going to be a little more serious. Maybe this is all worked out with the police in advance. I don't know. And, I especially give him credit because he points out, hey, I've got a meeting. I'm going to have a sit down with this guy. I think there'll be some other people too. So good for him. How much impact will this have? This is the outgoing deputy in the Department of Energy. Trump will have his own people in there. That guy, or he's the interior, right? The one from North Dakota, but whoever they're going to put in there is not going to give a crap what the protesters say. That said, I don't know that this group will care. They've given the back of their hand to protesters. Many protests that I was actually involved in stopped the Mountain Valley Pipeline, and we did for a while, and then Biden just overrode, with a stroke of a pen. Part of the budget deficit reconciliation, whatever it was, where they lifted the debt ceiling, right? And part of that was or there was a different, I don't know, maybe that was Willow Creek. One of them was Willow Creek, and the other was another deal they struck with Manchin to allow the Mountain Valley pipeline to go through. Horrible, awful, carbon bomb in Alaska and destroying beautiful, still relatively pristine wetlands in the West Virginia and Western Virginia region. So that's what, and putting all of us at risk, putting the Chesapeake Bay watershed at great risk of tainting, of toxicity from spills. So that's what Biden and Harris have done. So it's hard for me to believe that their energy department is going to change in any way, especially with a couple of weeks to go. So they're just going to meet, but still, no, but I don't want to be too dismissive. It's still good. And the civil disobedience is good. And we need all of that. It's just, I don't really want to get arrested, but I get it. Sometimes you have to do what's right, and you have to stand up and you have to speak truth to power. You just have to. And I doff my cap to the people who are willing to go that far. And it's a credit to them. No question about it. All right, let's get to, so my lead story was, what did I call it? The new anti-Semitism? Is this the new anti-Semitism? Yeah. So that's where you spray anti-Israel, anti-Zionist slogans on a car. You spray paint those on a car. Is that the new anti-Semitism? I guess it is. If you criticize Israel, that's anti-Semitism. This is where we are again. To me, that means no free speech. We've showed you the images of representatives, U.S. senators with Israeli flags outside their offices. That's where we are. CNN, University of Michigan Regent's home vandalized an anti-Semitic attack. This is from Dateline yesterday afternoon. Jake Tapper, right? So that's pretty serious. What did they spray paint? How did they vandalize? Did they spray paint kill all the Jews? Hitler was right. Swastikas? Did they chant anti-Semitic slogans? What kind of horrible, vicious hatred towards Jews? Did they beat up some Jewish people on their way to synagogue or home? People wearing yarmulkes? Is that what they did? Because, if it's anti-Semitic, it seems to me, you say it with such confidence, such certainty, it's anti-Semitism. It must have been clear. Well, this is what their evidence is. This is the image that leads the Jewish Insider article, in which they prominently and throughout the article call this a terrible hate crime. It's anti-Semitism. Divest, they kind of missed the T, or maybe the T is part of the F, divest, free Palestine. And then there's an upside down triangle. Now that's sprayed on the I guess that's an SUV. I don't know what kind of a car you call that thing, of the regent there, Jordan Acker. I have to say, this seems like vandalism. It's property destruction. I wouldn't like it if somebody did that to my car. I'd be pretty ticked off. I don't think I would jump to the conclusion that this was anti-Semitism, not from this alone. There's nothing about Jews. There's no SWAT. Like I said, there's no sign of hatred against Jews. There's no like yellow Jewish star with like an X through it, or, picture of Auschwitz that we're coming for you, Jew, or anything like that. It says divest, free Palestine. How I for the life of me don't get how that is anti-Semitic, but maybe Tapper's piece, maybe the piece in JI, Jewish Insider, will explain it, because the video, the image, right? They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, that one little picture there, that didn't tell me it was worth something, but it wasn't worth what they claim it is. At least as far as I can tell, it's not anti-Semitism. At least not that act. 240-242-5646. Please do call. We'd love to talk to you. So from Tapper's piece, a clear act of anti-Semitic intimidation. This was yesterday, early Monday, yesterday. Clear act. They got it by the way, they sure got that thing on CNN quick, did they not? Because this was dated yesterday, and it was yesterday. Clear act of clear. So so far what I've seen isn't clear, but maybe it was. What happened? Now, I want to be real clear. This isn't fun. I wouldn't want this to happen to me. I don't want people breaking the glass of my house at 2 a.m. I sure as heck don't. And I really don't want people spray painting my wife's car. That's bad stuff, right? It sucks. It's expensive. It's scary. I get it. But it's not clearly, or even in my view, arguably anti-Semitic. It's one Jewish man who has a lot of power, who is a regent at the University of Michigan, which has repeatedly refused to even entertain the idea of divesting from Israel. So the attack can very, very easily be understood as a defense, as an aggressive act against somebody who is defending, justifying, supporting genocide. That seems very clear to me. I don't jump. I don't believe we should ever assume racism, bigotry, xenophobia without evidence. And the fact that Israel is the source of the anger is not evidence, given what Israel's doing. It's killing Palestinians. But this is part and parcel of what the media does. This is exactly how the ADL, which, by the way, is no longer a legitimate source for for statistics regarding anti-Semitism, because it lies, or its definition is clearly bogus. But this is what they want. They want to suppress any criticism, any speech of it targeting Israel. Now, that said, this wasn't speech to me. Well, there's a speech component, obviously. There's a political component to this violence, much like the slaying of Brian Thompson was political. But it's also illegal. And we're going to get to what do we do about that? How do we deal with that? I don't have a good answer. I don't want people going around vandalizing cars. I don't want people going around smashing people's windows. But I think we need to understand why it's happening. And it's happening because we support genocide. People are being killed because they themselves are responsible for deaths. And we are living now in a society where violence is institutional, it's corporate, and the people no longer have the ability to make change, no longer have the ability to reform it peacefully. I don't believe we have that ability at this point. I don't believe this system can be changed peacefully. Now, I lament that. I find that horrifying. I have, my entire career since leaving law really has been about trying to peacefully change the system. And a big part of that is, look, I don't want violence. I don't want myself to be part of violence. I don't want to commit violent acts. I don't want to subject myself to being arrested. None of that. There's a lot of self-interest in this. We've seen when people take the law into their own hands, it may be very understandable. We may get why they're doing it, but so often it leads to worse outcomes, or outcomes that are, no better than what we had, than what the violent protesters are protesting. So but that said, what choice do we have? And I argued, listen, you got to vote for Jill Stein because she's for Medicare for all, but she's against violence. The other candidate, the Republican candidates are for violence. Clearly, unquestionably, without doubt. What's the evidence that this was anti-Semitism? Well, the ADL says that upside-down triangle you saw, not a swastika, is a symbol of violent resistance to Israel. That is not against Jews. That is against Israel. The media is telling you that there's this pernicious pathology that permeates society called anti-Semitism. But the evidence of that is weak to non-existent. This is not anti-Semitism. When I speak to people about this, they say, well, maybe this isn't, but there's plenty of other examples. Well, what are they? Let's see those examples. This is what CNN led with. This is what CNN is. This is what Jewish Insider, the voice of the Jewish people in the United States, presents as its evidence, as its proof of anti-Semitism. Well, I say it doesn't work. I say it's unpersuasive. I say it's unconvincing. I say it's not anti-Semitism. Do you have anything else? All right, 240-242-5646. Now, what these activists at the University of Michigan are doing is what I understand is the proper way of demanding, of trying to effectuate change. So this latest incident comes after months of escalating tension between the university's administration and students who have used increasingly confrontational tactics to demand leaders divest from Israel. And they're not going to do it, right? I mean, they just refuse to do it. I had this debate on Facebook with a Democratic, real pro-Democratic guy. I mean, a guy who works for Democrats, takes money, he works on campaigns. And I question, he was completely in the tank for Kamala and saying you have to vote for Kamala. And I said, look, how do we express our concerns about her support for genocide? Well, maybe you just don't, was the response. Maybe you just don't get to express it. Because it's, because we have to defeat Trump. So that's where we are. We can't express our concerns about genocide. We can't respond to genocide. Now, does that mean you get to spray paint a guy's car and throw rocks through his window? I don't like it. No, I don't think it's all right. I don't think it's justified. Is that a crime? Yes. You can't do the time, don't do the crime. But in the end, the statement is incredibly critical. It's critically important. And this regent, Jordan Acker, could avoid any future violence against himself. He could have avoided this from happening in the first place. And if it were anti-Semitism, he couldn't have. If this is being done because he's Jewish, then he's always going to be Jewish, right? I guess he could convert. It's a little different. He's born Jewish. It's part of his identity. But he could simply come out and issue a statement. I support divestment. I'm rallying the other regions to get our money out of companies that support Israel. Could just do that, right? You could say, I'm working with the students right now. It's a state university. They have a $6 billion endowment. It's incredibly rich. They don't even need all that money. They get money, operating expenses paid for by the state mostly. Or they certainly can. But you go ahead, invest in America invest in domestic companies that manufacture in the United States. Buy Michigan first. You could do all of that, Acker. And then nobody's going to be targeting you. Nobody's going to be attacking you. So Shade writes, to a defense attorney, this might not necessarily appear as anti-Semitism. However, to most people, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and is painted on the Jewish board member's card, is indeed a duck. Okay, so then my question to you, Shade, is how can you challenge a Jewish supporter of Israel without being accused of anti-Semitism? What would be an example in your mind of a non-anti-Semitic response? Because obviously you're going to have to say something about Israel, and they did. The claim of anti-Semitism comes mainly, or the justification for anti-Semitism, and Acker's the one who really, brings it up. He's the one who says, oh, this was anti-Semitism. Well, Acker's an interesting guy. Acker is not some diehard, aggressive Zionist. He's actually expressed real concerns about Israel. He has tried to build bridges with Palestinian students, and I respect that. I really do. But at some point, what happens is a lot of people, they cannot separate their identity as Jews from Israel. And they're unable at some point to say, okay, yes, I'm Jewish. Yes, because of the Holocaust and what have you, believe we need to have a Jewish state, but this isn't what I believe in. This isn't right. This isn't what I want. Maybe I have to reconsider my notions. But at some point, there's a limit for many, many Jews. They can only go so far. And in the end, they see themselves, and I've seen this with many Jewish people. Yes, it's bad what Israel's doing to the Palestinians. Yes, it's not right. But we're Jews, we have to stick together. But they'd push us in the ovens if they could. It's them or us. And I've seen this, and I hear it, and it's extremely upsetting. So what Acker says is there's nothing to do with the First Amendment, nothing to do with Palestine, which obviously it has everything to do. For him to say that's absurd. It has everything to do with Palestine. Why else? That's the only reason they're doing this, because of the genocide. And everything to do with trying to harass and intimidate Jews. Well, that's clearly false. But his evidence for that, he says this. He says the reason it happened is because he's getting it and others aren't. That there's, and I want to get that exact quote. That and all these folks came out and elected officials. There's so much anti-Semitism in America. It's so institutionalized that virtually every lawmaker in Michigan has come out and called it anti-Semitism. I mean, it's actually ironic, it's paradoxical, because if there really was this horrible anti-Semitism that was permeating society, then the lawmakers wouldn't say boo. They'd be part of it. In fact, it's just the opposite. We have a government that's completely siding with those who weaponize anti-Semitism, who say anti-Semitism is a scourge that we must eliminate, rather than, hey, these folks may have gone a little bit too far, but we're on the side of genocide. We got to do something about it. So I want to find that quote. Now I'm flailing around here, but his art. Okay, here it is. So this is the evidence. This is the evidence. This keeps happening to my family because I'm Jewish. Acker told Jewish Insider. There are others. So he's like, why aren't they going after the other board members? Why am I the target? There's others that are more prominent than I am. And the reason they're not getting it is because they're not Jewish. So let's address the first. I want to get to both of those. First is there's more prominent folks. Now, I don't know if there's more prominent. I don't know. I haven't gone through all of their CVs. But Acker's pretty darn prominent. He has his own successful law practice with his name on it, Acker and something, in Michigan. He's a former Obama administration official. So that's a pretty big, right? Pretty high up. He's he was a political appointee in the Obama administration. He's prominent. Now, I don't know. Maybe there's others who are more prominent. I don't know. There maybe in part people are saying, okay, he's Jewish. We want to go after him. I don't know. But I think the assumption should always be it's not anti-Semitic. It's not racist. It's not xenophobic unless you have evidence. You have a non-nefarious motive. And clearly the motive here, as is expressed clearly by the specific language, the verbiage used and not used, free Palestine, divest, upside down triangle, not kill the Jews, no swastika. Nothing like that. No anti-Semitic slur words, nothing. So all of that would strongly suggest that it was not anti-Semitic, A, and B, that it was motivated by the Israeli genocide, despite what all these Michigan officials might say. So I want to get just one other point, because the other argument he made is, well, I'm the only one. They're singling me out. And why? Because I'm Jewish. But in fact, they're not singling out the Jew. He's not the only one. He's not the only University of Michigan regent. You can see from CBS News back on May, body bags, fake blood left at University of Michigan regents' homes amid pro-Palestine protests. So the CBS News does not call it anti-Semitic, in part because there were other homes targeted, other regents, including Sarah Hubbard. And Sarah Hubbard's house was also, or at least her property was also, was addressed. People went to her house. And as far as I can tell, she's not Jewish. I don't believe. No one said. I looked this up. I says, Sarah Hubbard Jewish? It's not a Jewish sounding name. That doesn't mean anything, but I don't believe she's Jewish. She's a Republican. Acker's a Democrat. Hubbard's a Republican. Anti-Israel protest is dangerous escalation, says the Detroit Free Press. But if you look at the actual story, again, nothing targeting Jews. And very similar language. Hubbard, you can't hide. You're funding genocide. She complains. They arrived at my home at 5:54. They left debris all over the place. They left a letter taped to my front door. So it's not just Jews being targeted, but who is being targeted by the Michigan protesters are regions who will not support divestment. You want to call it genocide? You want to call it anti-Semitism? Fine. But Let's see the evidence. Let's see the actual, hate speech. 240-242-5646. Emoji, brown Muslim lives do not matter to those governments. I buy it. What is Zionism? Yeah, so Zionism is a good question. I always believed and understood Zionism to mean the belief that there has to be a state of Israel. There has to be a Jewish state. Jews need their own homeland to be safe. That's Zionism, as I understand it. And, maybe it's true. But that said, none of us can ever be safe. We're all at risk. And especially when there's so much inequality, so much injustice, so much suffering, so much pain that we are inflicting on others, whether we as me as a Jew, and I'm talking about collective Jewish people are through our Jewish state, or whether it's the United States government and United States corporations and institutions. You want to feel safe. You want peace. You got to work for justice. You may not still get peace, but that's the only hope. That's our only hope. That guy killed Brian Thompson. He promoted inequality. He promoted healthcare injustice. He profited obscenely from it. And now he's dead. He's a victim of our victimizing healthcare system. I saw this post. I really take issue with this. I made a big stink about this when someone else blamed how we have to convince people, right, that the problem is Americans don't get how great Medicare for All is. We have to convince them that they need to accept taxes of $2,000 a year rather than paying $8,000 a year in fees. Americans get it. These memes I find very problematic. They're pro-Medicare for all. It's true. They're pro-single payer. It is true. So this means the U.S. is the only place on earth where poor people shun free healthcare and free education because rich people tell them to. So it's definitely pro-single payer, which I am. But the person who posts this is blaming poor people. It's blaming the people, but it's not the poor people's fault. They're not driving the bus. They're not making the decision not to implement Medicare for all. It's the billionaire class and their lackeys, their political lackeys. The Republican Party that is denying Medicare for all against the wishes of the people. But that meme puts the onus on the victims. I don't believe in that. I disagree with that. And I posted, it's the corrupt parties, not the people who are to blame. And I that's very, very important. Now, if you wanted to make the argument, well, what about in 2016? People could have voted for a pro-Medicare for all candidate. And I'd say, yeah, and they did. And he would have won if the Democratic Party, hadn't put its fat thumb on the scale for Hillary. But I will blame Democratic primary voters. I will. Yes, we had an option, a really, really good option in 2016. And Democratic primary voters did not choose that option. But I don't know if that's the poor people's fault. Bernie did very well with lower income voters, and Bernie probably would have beaten Trump. But the Democratic Party rallied behind a for-profit healthcare advocate, Hillary Clinton. In 2020, the Democratic Party and virtually every candidate, in fact, I think it was every Democratic candidate, except for Bernie, rallied for for-profit healthcare. In 2024, the only pro-healthcare party candidate that was on more than, 50% of the ballot, the state ballots, was Jill Stein. And I strongly urged people to vote for her and was attacked roundly for doing so. But it's certainly, you cannot blame poor people. You cannot blame voters for the fact that we didn't have a non-corrupt candidate running. And I pushed back on, Twitter or wherever this was, Facebook, not X. I pushed back. I said, hey, it's the people, not the party. It's the parties, not the people to blame. And the response was, well, my experience is it's the people who listen and repeat what Fox News says you're wrong. Okay, so maybe some Fox News viewers don't believe in Medicare for all. Okay, but that's a minority. That's not everybody. And my response, again, neither major party presidential nominee has supported Medicare for all in at least 32 years since Clinton, 92. That's 32 years ago. He did have, Hillary Care, and people voted for him and voted for Hillary Care, and it was defeated by Harry and Louise. For whom are pro-Medicare for all voters supposed to vote? And then you can see more and more Americans favor single payer. It's not the people. It's a government that doesn't respond to the demands of the American people. So again, my question is, what are we supposed to do? That's why I get to that issue of, well, what alternative besides violence is there? And I'm certainly not calling for it. And I think civil disobedience certainly should come first. But even civil disobedience is roundly ignored. I wish I had an answer. From the Pew Research Center. It's interesting, the dateline. I do urge you to look at that in this slide I'm going to share in a second. It's very, very interesting because this is in response to the claim that it's the poor people's fault. It's the American people's fault that we don't have universal single health care because we vote the way rich people tell us. But what you can see here is most Americans, this was before the Trump-Biden election, an increasing share of Americans favor a single government program to provide health care coverage. But the two choices did not support single payer. In fact, one of them said he'd veto Medicare for all. Neither political party pushed for it. In 2021, the Democrats had an opportunity. And guess what they did? They impeached the guy who wasn't even in office. And they failed at it, and they made him more popular, and now he's president. But that's what your Democrat Party did. So what are we supposed to do? A majority of Democrats, a majority of all Americans, favor a national government program. If you look at this, 63% in 2020, 63, nearly two-thirds, 63%. 88% of Democrats said yes to single payer. Democrat Party couldn't be bothered, wasn't going to hear about it, didn't listen to it. AOC and her squad would not demand as a condition of voting for Hillary Clinton that she hold a vote for Medicare for all. So our government clearly we don't live in a democracy. Our government is not democratic. The electeds do not respond to political pressure. They do not respond to the will of the people. What are we supposed to do? One thing I don't think we should do is blame voters. Blame who don't have an option. Well, this guy decided what he was going to do is he was going to kill a healthcare executive, the CEO of perhaps the worst of all, the company that denies the most claims. $10 million man plus bonuses. $10 million plus bonuses man. Luigi Mangione, by the way, apparently very wealthy, from Baltimore, lived in Altoona, PA. He's been charged. And we'll go through this a little bit, and then I want to play a clip, which I think is kind of indicative of where we are politically. And how, I don't want to even say clueless, out of touch, what have you, the political elites are. I think they get it. They They just, don't want to acknowledge the anger that courses through America. They don't want to acknowledge it because then they would have a duty to do something about it. He was arrested, 26 years old. He was previously a person of interest, and they found weapons. I mean, he was clearly loaded to the hilt. He's guilty. So what did he say? And it was a political act. Excuse me. We have the most expensive healthcare system in the world, but 42nd in life expectancy. It's true. I don't know if that exact number is correct, but it sounds about right to me. Referred to corporations as mafiosa? Who could say they're not? They've gotten too powerful? Of course they are. And they abuse the U.S. for immense profits, no question. Yeah, I mean, exact 100%. Where we are. And so he's going to jail, probably for the rest of his life. I don't know. They'll probably seek the death penalty. I don't know. Let's go to, this was in Pennsylvania. He was arrested there. So Josh Shapiro is the governor. Josh Shapiro, if I sort of slurred his name a little bit, I think I said Josh. It's Josh Shapiro, who was touted as a better choice. Oh, if only Kamala had picked him instead of Tim Walz, she probably would have won. So here's that man of the people, Josh Shapiro.
Violence can never be used to address political differences or to address a substantive difference.
Violence can never be used, he says. And, it sounds really good. This is a full-throated Zionist, is Josh Shapiro, a complete supporter of Israel, is cracking down on student protesters. Isn't Israel using violence? Isn't that exactly how it's responding to the Palestinian people, with extraordinary, overwhelming violence? Isn't that right, Josh Shapiro? And you could say, well, they're using violence to respond to violence. Yeah, but I mean, when does it end then? I'm somewhat surprised that you're so anti-violence in this, in this context. A guy who's, worth tens of, paid 8+ figures to deny health care to people, to watch them die rather than pay for life-saving treatment. But that, any kind of violent response to that, you're totally against. It can never, ever be used. Okay, I'll accept that, though. I don't like it either.
Prove some ideological point. That is not what we do in a civilized society. That was true.
But are we civilized? See, and I agree with him. But I don't know how you can say we're civilized, Governor Shapiro, when some people are paid tens of millions of dollars to deny health care to homeless people, to deny health care to working class Americans, to deny health care to moms, children, fathers. Is that civilized? I don't think it is.
In Butler, it was true in New York City, it's true anywhere.
All right, so there's your governor. You can never use violence to address political differences. No matter how badly you're hurt, no matter how badly people you love are treated, even killed, violence is never the answer. Okay, I'll buy it if you provide me with an alternative way to respond to injustice, to oppression, to poverty. What's your answer if we don't live in a democracy? If the elected representatives are not representing the people who voted for them, but rather, and who didn't vote for them, but rather elites, corporate, financial, billionaire class elites. What is this way to deal with this? Because we hear a lot of chiding and criticism and pearl clutching all the time. But, how dare, oh my God, they went after Acker. It must be because he's Jewish. What do you propose? How would you deal with this injustice in an effective way? How do you recommend those of us who are horrified, disgusted, sickened by society's trajectory, who view the climate holocaust as currently existentially destroying our planet, life itself? How would you recommend people respond, since you're so against violence, Governor Shapiro? I asked they oppose sweeping change because of course, any effective ways to address this that cause real discomfort to the elites, they're going to oppose. Of course. But then come up with another answer. Come up with a solution that will work. I remember having this conversation with a very pro-Israel person. That's how I'll describe them. And they went on and on about how ignorant the college students were, the protesters were, the ones at Columbia, how they don't understand the situation, how they clearly don't recognize how victimized Israel is, and how their chants are making Jews uncomfortable and Israelis uncomfortable. And I said, well, then what should they do? They're seeing their co-religionists, their ethnic compatriots being killed, being wiped off the planet. You don't want them to protest on a campus. What should they do? What's an okay response in your opinion? Since you don't agree with this. And there was just no. Well, they can speak out. Okay. They are speaking out. That's exactly what they were doing. All right. 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. All right, before I take off, one more response here. Perhaps you should support incremental change. Well, we've seen incremental change, and it's made things worse and worse and worse. We, certainly since Nixon became president, we've seen this country become more and more unequal. We've seen our empire flailing like an enormous bull elephant, trampling down people all over the planet. We've seen our working class become poorer, weaker, more unhealthy. We've seen the climate become less and less hospitable to the biodiversity that had evolved to this point on the planet. So incremental change hasn't been a good thing. It's been bad. It's incremental change for the worse, regardless of who's president, regardless of who controls Congress. There hasn't been change for the good, change for the better. There's been change for the worse. And I certainly would support incremental change. I support legislation that will make things better, even if only a little bit better. I actually, at the time, I was agnostic on the Affordable Care Act. I was like, well, maybe it will make things a little better. I don't think it has. I do acknowledge there are people who have insurance now who didn't. But it's also ensconced and completely embedded for-profit healthcare in our system. And it seems as though it's even less pervious to change. So I don't see where there's been this positive incremental change. For every half step forward we take, we're taking 2 full steps back. But I would love to hear it if you believe that there's incremental change possible. What are the examples of it? Where have we seen it's led to truly improved circumstances in recent years? When we have had massive change, that's when we've seen better things. Whether it was the government pursuing antitrust cases against Standard Oil and other monopolies 120 years ago. Whether it was the New Deal and the laws that made it much easier for individuals to join unions. Those were massive changes. Society went in a very, very different direction. It wasn't slight or incremental. Same with the civil rights. Jim Crow, in the aftermath of legalized oppression, just was gone. It took from Brown versus Board of Education till the Voting Rights Act and other civil rights legislation. It was about 10, 12 years. Massive changes. Now we've seen backsliding. We've seen loss of economic power among African Americans since then, but it was a huge step forward. And then I would posit on balance small steps back, notwithstanding the election of a black president and a black vice president. The solutions are going to have to be very, very significant, very, very drastic right now. The incrementalism that folks like the Squad call for just aren't doing it. They're pushing us in the wrong direction. All right, that's going to do it for me today. My plan is to go downtown tomorrow to protest, again, to speak to legislators to the extent possible against Israel, against continuing funding Israel. So I will do a show, though, of course, but probably later in the day. And all I can ask you is to enjoy your day. Thanks for being part of Halitics.